students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, those who are listening from the field of arts, commerce, engineering, the most honorable President Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, honorable advocates, advertisers, administrators and advisors, reverend fathers and mothers, affectionate sons and daughters, I, Dr. Rakesh from USA, heartily, cordially welcome all of you. It is really nice time, nice place, nice section. Very interesting poem written by Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold, who is known as Victorian poet, who wrote Sohrab and Rustum. How has he appreciated our defense forces? It is really praiseworthy. Our students of English language, literature and grammar, those who are preparing NET/SLET and other competitive examinations, especially in English literature, they are listening. New objectives. What are the real objectives of our defense forces? Our Air Force, NDA, Army and Navy. Their chief aim is to bring equality, unity and oneness by abolishing and uprooting the distinctions and differences on the basis of caste, color, creed, language, and to bring peace and prosperity through the divine law. So this poem, you will listen and you will read at the result that it is being appreciated with the holy words of literature. Sohrab and Rustum, it is a long poem composed by Matthew Arnold. The poem opens with a beautiful picture of the river Ox in the grey mist dawn and closes with the picture of the same river flowing steadily, unmoved by the tragedy. This is very artistic setting of the poem. The restlessness of the youthful Sohrab is contrasted with the calmness and tranquility of the river nature. It was early in the morning and the grey streaks of dawn filled the eastern horizon, and the vapors of fog mist rose out of the Oxus river, but entire camp of the Tartars, its tents pitched along the bank of the river, was enveloped in silence, and even now the men sleeping there were sunk in deep sleep. Sohrab alone lay awake. In fact, throughout the long, drawn night, he had lain sleepless, turning uneasily on his bed from side to side. But when the grey light of the dawn made its stealthy way into his tent, he got up from his bed, dressed himself, took his rider's cloak, and fastening his sword to its side, into the cold and wet mist, passing through the dimly lit camp to reach the tent of Parenvisa, the commander of the Sumerian, the commander of the Sumerian forces. प्रस्तुत पद्यांश मैथ्यू आर्नोल्ड द्वारा रचित लंबी कविता सौरभ एंड रुस्तम का प्रारंभिक पद्यांश है। यह कविता सुंदर ऑक्सस नदी के चित्रण से शुरू होती है, जो कि कोहरे युक्त भोर के समय शांत भाव से बह रही है। यह कविता इसी नदी के चित्रण के साथ ही समाप्त भी होती है, जो कि घटित हो चुकी त्रासदी से अप्रभावित शांति से बह रही है। यह कविता की कलात्मक सेटिंग है। नौजवान सौरभ की बेचैनी की नदी की शांति एवं एकाकीपन से विषमता दर्शाई गई है। उषा काल का समय था और पूर्व दिशा की ओर की क्षितिज भूरे रंग की लकीरों से भरी हुई थी और ऑक्सस नदी की सतह पर कोहरे के बादल ऊपर उठ रहे थे, परंतु तातार सेना का डेरा, जिसके तंबू नदी के तट से लगे हुए थे, पूर्णतः शांत था और इस समय वहां पर सोए हुए सभी व्यक्ति प्रगाढ़ निद्रा में मगन थे। केवल अकेला सोहरब ही जाग रहा था। वह सारी रात ही जाग कर अपनी सैया पर करवटें बदलता रहता था, परंतु भूरे वर्ण के उषा काल ने जब उसके तंबू में चुपके से प्रवेश किया, वह अपनी शैया से उठा। उसने अपने वस्त्र धारण करे और अपना अश्वारोही और तलवार बांध के धुंधले प्रकाश से आवृत डेरे में से होते हुए शीतल और भीगे कोहरे में बाहर निकल के पैरनवीजा, तुगनी सेना का नायक, के तंबू की ओर चल पड़ा। Further, in this stanza, the tents of Tartar army have been described as to how they were located and fixed at the bank of Oxus River. Sohrab, in the very early morning, goes to meet the chief of Tartar army, Parenvisa. Sohrab passed away the dark Tartar tents, which stood like a bunch of beehives on the low and flat bank of the Oxus, which is flooded during summer when the snow melts high up on the plateau of Pamer. He passed through the dark tents over that low bank and came to a small hill, a limit behind the river's edge, the place against which a boat first rubs itself when crossing the river in summer. The men of the ancient times had covered the top of this hill log with a clay fort, but that had fallen, and now the Tartars had built there the tent of Parenvisa. It was in the shape of a dome and was made of thin slips of wood joined together, and it was covered with pieces of felt, a kind of wooden fabric. And Sohrab came there, entered the tent, and stood upon the thick heap of carpets spread in the tent. He found the old man Paranvisa sleeping on his bed, which was made with rugs, and felt his weapons lay near him. Paranvisa heard his footsteps, even though their sound was softened by the thickness of the carpet, for he was an old man and did not sleep very soundly. And he rose quickly, supporting himself on one arm, and said, "Who are you? Tell me, because I cannot see you clearly, because it is not yet clear. Morning, speak. Is there any news, or has there been some?" Paranvija finds Sohrab impatient and elucidates him. He asks him not to take he asks him not to take the risk of single combat. He advises him to find his father in peace somewhere else. It will not be wise to put the life in danger. Sohrab further said, "The fame achieved by an ordinary battle in which two armies fight is not very loud as the names of many that fall there are never again heard. But the fame achieved by a duel spreads loudly and clearly." And Paranvisa took the band of the young man, Sohrab, in his hand, sighed with grief, and spoke as follows: "O Sohrab, your heart is restless. Can you not stay among the Tartar noblemen and take with us, who love you, the commonly shared risk of this war, but must insist always on being the first to take individual risks by inviting duels with the aim of finding a father whom you have never seen? My son, I feel that while the war is going on, it would be best for you to stay with us in our tents. And when the war is over, you may live in the town of the appreciate. But if this one desire of finding Rustum overcomes every other desires in your heart, even then do not try to find him through fighting. Search for him in peace. O Sohrab, you should take to your father's embrace a healthy and unwounded, uninjured son, but search to him far away from Hajj. Because he is not here, today things have changed, and they are not as they used to be when I was a young man, and when Rustum used to be a leading warrior in every battle. But now he has retired and remains aloof, staying at home in Sistan with his old father Jail. By this time, the sun had risen and cleared, and cleared away the vapors of fog from the wide Oxus river and its banks, which were covered with brightly shining sand. And the Tartar cavalrymen marched in the open field from their tents in a single file. Haman, who commanded the army next to Paranvisa, had ordered them to do too. He was still in his vigorous early youth. The long single files of horsemen moved out of their black tents in a continuous stream. They looked like the rows of long-necked migrating cranes spread along the sky like an army under marching orders, who fly in a continuous stream over the city of Casbin and the southern slopes of the Alborz mountain range, flying from the river basins in the Ural Sea or some or other, migrating from the frozen marshes of the Caspian Sea, which are covered with reed. Good evening students, how are you? There are so many diversities, adversities and varieties you are capturing, listening images from your mind, from the nature, how poet has tried to express the Oxus river, natural scenery, which are covered with reeds, flying southward to reach the warm Persian Sea coast. This is how they marched in a continuous stream. The first horsemen to come out were the Tartars of Oxus, known as the King's Guard, who wore black caps made of sheepskin and carried long spears. They were all men of large size and rode on the large war horses of the finest Arabian breed. They had come from Bukhara and Kahiva and were fond of consuming a special drink fermented from the milk of mares, from the milk of Mars. The poet describes different types of horsemen of Tartar army. The poet classifies them and mentions some of their characteristics. All they came in battlefield, being ready to fight. As well, the poet tells us about Persian soldiers also. Next to these appeared the less ferocious Turkmens of the south, followed by the Tukas from Azerbaijan and the horsemen armed with long spears from Salor. And these were followed by men from the basin of the river Atruk in Khorasan and the sandy lanes near the Caspian Sea. They were not heavy in their build and rode only light horses, and their only drink was the acidus milk of camel with fresh water from their own wells. And then came a huge cavalcade of nomadic horsemen from far off places, mercenaries whose loyalty towards appreciate was doubtful and less dependable than were the Tartars of Fergana coming from the banks of the river Sardaria, men with small and thin beards, covering their skulls with small claws-fitting caps, and those more savage multitudes of nomadic clans which wander all over Kipchak, a province about 70 miles below Khiva on the Oxus, and the northern wastelands, and which are represented by Kalmuk Tartars, untidy and such looking Cossacks belonging to tribes that wander closest the North Pole, and the nomadic Kyrgyzs that ride long-hatted ponies from the plateau of Pamir. All they rode out in a single file from the Tartar camp into the plain. Students, you are listening. Very interesting poem. Keep continue your presence. That will enhance your knowledge in English literature. Really a knowledgeable poem. It was written by Sohrab and Rustum for providing you the great knowledge of literature. Dear friends, you are listening and watching the truth of science to spirituality, language to literature. On the other side, the Parisians drew themselves up and prepared for the battle. First to appear was a small party of horsemen in a loose array. They appeared to be the Tartars from the tribes of Khorasan, and behind them appeared the royal Persian army. Cavalry as well as infantry drawn up in battle array, shining with their brightly polished swords and lances. This stanza tells that Baron Visa reached to the place between both the armies that was blank, that is, there were no soldiers, and he proposed the challenge of Sohrab to the chief of Persian army. Hearing this, there emerged a wave of happiness in Tartar army. But Baron Visa, accompanied with his official messenger, came to the front carefully, jostling his way through the thickly arrayed Tartar troops, and held back the leading soldiers with his field marshal baton, means staff, and when Firuz, who commanded the Persian forces, saw that Baron Visa was housing the Tartars back, he took his lance and walked to the front of his troops to control his soldiers and to command them to stand motionless where they stood. The old Tartars came upon the sandy plain between the two silent armies and spoke as follows: O Farut, and O you Persian and Tartars, listen to me. Let there be between our forces today, but select a champion warrior from among us, the Persian nobleman, to fight a man-to-man duel with our champion Sohrab. as in the English countryside during midsummer on a morning in the month of June, when the dewdrops shine like bright pearls on the ears of corn. A vibration of pleasure runs through the deep-rooted corn stalk in the same way. When they heard what what Parenvisa what Parenvisa had said, a thrilling vibration of pride and hope ran through all the Tartar troops for Sohrab, whom they loved. Hearing the proposal of Parenvisa, Persian soldiers were afraid because there was none in their army matched to Sohrab. The poet compares their behavior to traveling hawkers from Kabul, the chief of Persian army. Firud consults the other noblemen. One of them, Gudurz, advises him to accept the challenge. He assures to make Rustum agree for this challenge, who was displeased at that time. Firud accepts the challenge of Parenvisa. Hearing the challenging offer of Parenvisa, the Persian grew pale, their cheeks losing color on account of fear, and held their breath in suspense, behaving exactly in the same way as a caravan of traveling hawkers from Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, when passing under the Hindu Kush, that huge sky kissing mountain covered with milk white snow, turning round so high that as they climbed to the higher ranges, they passed flocks of dead migratory birds lying on the snow, suffocated by the thin, oxygen deficient air at the great height. They themselves can hardly moisten their dried up throat by the sweet mulberries that they carry with them for the express purpose. Here they move one by one at a time the narrow hill track and hold their breath lest they should loosen the overhanging snow come down on their heads in the shape of a devastating avalanche snowstorm. And the fellow noblemen of Firuz came up to advise him. They were Gudurz, Johare, and Ferabars, the last of them being the second in command of the Persian forces and uncle to the king. All these came and consulted among themselves. And then Gudurz spoke as follows: Firuz, if we do not desire to be put to shame, then we must accept this challenge. Yet we do not have any champion great enough to be a match for this young man. He is as agile and quick as a stag and as brave as a lion. But Rustum came only yesterday night. He is sitting all by himself in a sulky mood, and has put his tent away from all of us in a lonely corner of the camp. I will go and find him and tell him about the challenge of the Tartars and give him this young man's name. Perhaps he will forget his race against us and agree to fight. In the meantime, you stand out and accept their challenge. He spoke in this manner. And Firuz stepped out and said, Well, reverend old man, we agree with your proposal. Let Sohrab get ready. we all find a man. He spoke, and Paranvisa turned his face and went back to his tent through the troops made away before him. Gudurz goes fastly to the tent of Rustum to tell him about the challenge from Tartar army. Rustum had fixed his tent away from the army. He is displeased from the king this time and not taking part in the battle. There are several types of eating and drinking items at his dinner table. Rustum becomes happy to see Gudurz. He asks latest news from him. But Gudurz ran through the ranks of Persians who were extremely worried and crossed the camp which lay far behind the army, coming out on the sandy plain which was on its other side. The tents of Rustum, which had been erected recently, were made of scarlet colored cloth and shining brightly. The rich and luxurious tent that was pitched in the middle belonged to Rustum and his followers, had their tent all around it. And Gudurz entered the tent of Rustum and found him there. Though his morning meal was over, the dining table still stood by his side. It was filled with gourd. It was filled with food, a side of roasted sheep, cakes of bread, and dark green watermelons. And Rustum sat there in a mood of inactive passiveness, playing with a hawk, perching on his wrist. But Gudurz came and stood before him. When Rustum looked up and saw him stand there, he jumped with a cry, got rid of the bird, and holding out both of his hands, spoke as follows: "Welcome. I am highly pleased to see you. What news have you brought? But first of all, sit down and eat and drink something." Gudurz tells Rustum the challenge of single combat Tartar army. He requests Rustum to accept this challenge as there is none in Iran a warrior matched to Sohrab. But Rustum says bitterly that he has become old now. He wants to take rest. Now he will repose at his native home, looking after his old father. He expresses detachment to war, but Gudurz kept standing at the door of the tent and said, "Not now. The time of eating and drinking will also come. But today we have other things to do. The armies of both sides are facing each other, drawn in the battle array, because a challenge has been brought to us from the Tartars. They want us to select a champion warrior from among us, the Persian nobility, to fight a duel with their champion and know his name. He is known as, he knows as Sohrab, but his parentage is unknown. O Rustum, this kingman's strength is equal to yours. He is as agile as a stag and as bold as a lion. He is a young man, and lords of Iran are all old or too weak to combat. O Rustum, now the eyes of all Persians are raised towards you. If you do not come down to help us, we shall face a terrible disaster." Gudurz finished his speech, but Rustum replied, with an ironic smile playing upon his lip, "Get along with you. If the lords of Iran are old, I am older. If those who are still young are weak, the king is grotesquely in the wrong, because the king Kai Khosru is himself young and respects only younger men and allows the old men to rot in their giving graves. He does not love Rustam anymore, but loves only the young people. The blood of the young people may boil on hearing the boast of Sohrab, but those boasts do not affect me in any way, for I wish that I had been lucky enough to have a son like him instead of that small. I could have sent him to light, or he could have stayed with my father who was born with snow white head of hair. Now my weak and old father does not have anybody at home to protect him. The Afghan robbers trouble him and trespass into his territory or try to cut it short by usurping small pieces of land, and often harass him by driving away his herds of cattle. There I would go and bang my coats of nail up for good and protect the weak old man with my already established great reputation as a veteran fighter. There I will spend the handsome amount of wealth that I have earned and give rest to my old limbs and enjoy hearing the account of the justly famous heroic feat of Sohrab. I will leave the armies of ungrateful kings to die and will never again take my sword out of its sheath with these killing hands of mine. When Rustam refused to fight, Gudurz made efforts to make him agree for the fight, giving argument after arguments. He said the people will say different kinds of humiliations, talks about him if he does not fight. Rustum says that it does not matter to him. At last, he agrees to fight the single combat with Sohrab. This is how Rustum spoke and smiled. Hearing his words, Gudurj replied, "O Rustam, if you will talk like this, what will the people say when Sohrab challenges the bravest of our noblemen to a combat, and especially when he reaches for you most of all? And you, the great Rustam, hide your face from that person who searches for you most of all. You should be careful for fear that people should say, Rustam hoards his fame the way some old miserly fellow hoards his money and avoids to risk it by fighting with a young man." Rustam was greatly moved by these words of Gudurz and replied, "O Gudurz, why do you use these such words? You are clever enough to use better words. How does it matter to me if there is one more or one less unknown or famous man, brave or cowardly man, and young or old man? But do they matter to me? Are they, as well as I, not determined to die, but who would do great deeds for the sake of such men who are good for nothing? Come on, now you will see how Rustam hoards his fame, or rather preserves it. But I will fight incognito, unknown, and in the simple guise of an ordinary soldier. Do not let anybody say that it was Rustam who joined himself in a deal with any mortal man. धन्यवाद. Thank you all of you. Nice.
Hello. Ba lain ko ito rute. Uprain ko